There's a pencil in the National Archives, just an ordinary yellow number 2, preserved in a clear plastic sleeve alongside a folded map of the Ardennes. The catalogue card identifies it as belonging to Technical Sergeant Dorothy Marsh, 3rd Army G2, Section, spring of 1945. What the card doesn't explain is why this particular pencil ended up being the instrument that cost a field-grade officer his entire career. The map tells part of the story. Red pencil marks trace a specific road junction outside Trier. Blue circles indicate suspected armor concentrations hidden under forest canopy. Handwritten notes in the margins reference radio traffic patterns and fuel transport schedules from rail yards near Koblenz. The precision is remarkable. The predictions, as it turned out, were flawless. 72 hours after this map was drawn, an entire American infantry regiment was nearly destroyed in those exact coordinates. So why didn't anyone act on it? That answer requires understanding two very different people who occupied the same cramped intelligence office in Luxembourg City during the final months of the European War. Dorothy Marsh came from Chicago's North Side. Her father ran a high school and believed mathematics had no gender. She graduated Northwestern in 1940 with a degree that qualified her for exactly two career paths, teaching or marriage. She chose neither. When the Women's Army Corps opened recruitment in 1942, she enlisted specifically for signals intelligence work, not to serve coffee, not to type letters, to break codes. By March 1945, she had 18 months of night shifts in windowless rooms, deciphering German Enigma transmissions. Her eyes carried permanent shadows from the low light. Her record showed 5 correct operational predictions, including a withdrawal forecast that pulled an entire battalion out of what would have been a killing zone. She was very good at her job. That was about to become a serious problem for someone else. Major Clifford Hale was Annapolis, class of 1928. His uniform creases could draw blood. His boots reflected ceiling lights, even in the perpetual mud of a Luxembourg spring. He served as the G2 briefing officer, the filter between raw intelligence and command decisions. He believed warfare was a gentleman's profession, best practiced by men with the right pedigree and the right schools on their records. He had stolen Dorothy's analysis twice before, presenting her work as his own during briefings. He considered this acceptable because he fundamentally believed intelligence work in combat theaters was no place for women. They were, in his assessment, useful for processing paperwork, but incapable of the intuitive judgment required for real operational decisions. He was about to discover exactly how wrong a man with perfect boots could be. By early March, Patton's Third Army was racing toward the Rhine so fast they were outrunning their own supply columns. The German Wehrmacht was collapsing, but not uniformly. Localized counterattacks still erupted with shocking violence, designed to buy time for a miracle that would never arrive. Intelligence sections were drowning in data. Thousands of radio intercepts, prisoner statements, aerial reconnaissance photos flooding in every day. Senior officers, exhausted from fighting since Normandy, started relying more on instinct than analysis. They wanted the war to be over. That desire created blind spots. Dorothy noticed something in the traffic patterns. The 10th SS Panzer Division's radio signature had vanished from the Trier sector. Not scattered, not reduced, completely silent. She cross-referenced fuel transport logs from Koblenz. Heavy shipments were still arriving, but there was no corresponding radio chatter. She knew what that meant. They were hiding under forest cover during daylight, moving armor into position at night, preparing to hit an American line that believed itself in a quiet sector. She built her case methodically. Radio silence mapped against fuel data. Aerial photos showing empty fields that should have shown tank tracks if the Germans were actually retreating. Prisoner interrogation reports mentioning SS officers in areas that were supposed to be clear. She assembled everything on a single map board and walked it to Major Hale's desk. What happened next was documented by 3 separate witnesses who were in the room. Dorothy presented her findings. Hale glanced at the map for less than 30 seconds. He told her aerial reconnaissance showed the sector empty. She explained the Germans were concealing movement under canopy. He told her she was seeing patterns that didn't exist. She insisted the data was unambiguous. Hale stood up and informed her that he was a graduate of Annapolis and had been leading men since she was in pigtails. Oh, he wasn't going to present intelligence from a girl with a pencil to the commanding general. He removed her detailed overlays from the map board and dropped them into a wastebasket. He picked up his own simplified assessment, showing the sector as safe, and walked toward the command office to deliver his briefing. 6 hours later, German Panzers tore through the woods exactly where Dorothy had marked her map. The American infantry regiment, positioned without anti-tank support, was butchered in their foxholes. Casualty reports reached Luxembourg by dawn. 1 hour after that, General George S. Patton arrived in a staff car at high speed. Patton entered the G2 section, wearing his full 4-star helmet and the ivory-handled revolvers that were his trademark. He carried 2 folders. The room went silent instantly. He walked directly to Major Hale and dropped both folders on his desk. The first folder contained Dorothy's original analysis, dated 3 days prior, predicting a Panzer thrust in the exact location where American soldiers had just been killed. Patton asked if it was Hale's work. Hale said no. The second folder contained Hale's report, declaring the sector clear and the Germans in full retreat. Patton asked if that was Hale's work. Hale confirmed it was. Patton asked a single question: why did you ignore the correct analysis? Hale's answer was documented in the after-action report. He stated he didn't believe the source was credible for a combat briefing because it came from a female analyst. Patton's response was immediate and public. He told Hale that he didn't care if intelligence came from a man, a woman, or a trained monkey. He cared whether it was accurate. Dorothy's was right. Hale's was fantasy. Hale had traded American lives for his own pride and was no longer fit to serve in the intelligence section. Patton gave him 10 minutes to clear his desk. In front of the entire section, Patton ordered sergeants to remove everything from Hale's desk and pile it in the hallway. He then called Dorothy forward and told her to take the seat. From that moment forward, her reports would come directly to Patton's desk. Bypassing all intermediaries, Hale was escorted out by military police and reassigned to a replacement depot, processing casualty reports for the very infantry units his arrogance had failed to protect. He spent the rest of the war standing in the mud, watching columns of wounded soldiers, every bandage a reminder of the data he had thrown away. Dorothy Marsh remained with the Third Army until Germany surrendered. She made captain. She returned to Chicago in 1946 and worked 3 decades as a senior statistical analyst for an insurance company. She never talked to her neighbors about the war. When she died in 1988, her family found a small cedar chest containing her service medals and 1 yellowed map of the Ardennes, marked in red and blue pencil. Clifford Hale was discharged in 1947. He attempted a political career in Maryland, but was quietly haunted by the whispers of his failure. He spent his final years writing bitter letters to military journals, insisting history had been rewritten by political interests. He died in 1972, still believing the world had treated him unfairly. Patton never publicly discussed the incident, but he kept a copy of Dorothy's original report in his personal files until his death. In a letter to his wife Beatrice, he wrote that the greatest threat to a soldier isn't always the enemy across the field, but the man standing next to him who thinks he already knows everything. Some historians argue Patton's decision was purely operational. Any officer who suppressed vital intelligence was a liability he couldn't afford. Others see it as a deliberate dismantling of an outdated culture that valued pedigree over competence. What's certain is this: the intelligence provided by wacky analysts transformed how the Third Army identified German movements in the final months of the war. The pencil turned out to be sharper than the ego. If you find these buried pieces of history valuable, subscribe. We're digging up the stories where the official narrative left out the most important details. And if you were in command, tell us in the comments. Would you have done the same or handled it differently?